How's it going, sports gamers? Mike Straw, managing editor of Sports Gamers Online here. And it's safe to say that February 2nd, 2021 is going to go down as the biggest news day in recent sports gaming memory, all for one reason: the return of EA Sports college football after a long, and I mean long, 8 years. Now, 8 years doesn't sound like much, and in the grand scheme of things, 8 years isn't that long of a time. But for video games, it feels like a lifetime ago. Let's go back to 2013 when we last got NCAA Football 14. Barack Obama was just starting his second term as president of the US. The Harlem Shake was a thing, and we were just getting ready to start the Xbox One and PS4 generation of gaming. So we've gone through an entire generation of consoles before we got another college football game. But now that it's here, it's time to dive into a little bit more. It's time to take a look at just how we got here. What led up to today being the day that EA Sports announced its return to college football.
Source for the sports gamer.
So to get a clear answer on things, we have to kind of look at what happened. We have to go all the way back again to 2013 when NCAA Football 14 was released. Now, back in July of 2013 when it was launched, NCAA Football 14 came out to admittedly mixed reviews from critics and fans, though the absence of the series has made the heart grow fonder over time. But not long after its launch, the lawsuit between former UCLA basketball star Ed O'Bannon and the NCAA finally went to trial after being filed initially in 2009. The judge in that trial ruled that the NCAA had been violating antitrust laws by barring payments to student athletes for their likenesses in video games, DVDs, apparel, and memorabilia. Now, of course, the NCAA argued that they did nothing wrong, that this was all fine, well within the rules, but the court obviously saw otherwise. The verdict of that case meant that student athletes owned their own name and likeness no matter what the NCAA believed. But despite that victory in the courtroom, companies had been too hesitant to touch college sports, let alone an NCAA football game. For EA specifically, things had been extremely rocky because of that lawsuit that led to them pulling away. Now, EA was dismissed initially from the lawsuit in 2011, but that wasn't permanent after U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilkin reversed that decision after it came to light that EA agreed not to pay former college athletes for their likenesses after their careers ended. As part of that case with EA back, emails were eventually released that showed that the NCAA knew that EA Sports was intentionally resembling current and past college athletes in its game with no intention of paying them. In 2013, though, it all came to a head as EA and the College Licensing Committee ultimately came to a settlement agreement with O'Bannon and the other plaintiffs in the suit for a total of $40 million. But that settlement in 2013 effectively ended the NCAA football series for EA Sports. But since that time, we know that EA had plans for college football 15. But what else has happened since that kind of got us to where we are? So once the dust settled on that O'Bannon case, things kept moving slowly along to get student athletes more rights to compensation in regards to their likenesses. Multiple states, including Florida, California, New York, have either proposed or passed laws allowing student athletes to profit off their own likeness. And in April 2020, it was then announced that the NCAA was going to create a new policy for athletes in regards to compensation for third-party endorsements from various businesses and appearances. That news initially seemed like a great chance for the return of college sports games. But it was revealed that as a part of that plan, players who would have to be licensed on an individual basis similar to that of boxers would not be allowed to reference any trademarks or other intellectual property owned by the school they attended. At the time, the Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman was quoted as saying that the idea of group licensing with student athletes just wasn't viable. She said that it was the group's conclusion that group licenses, which would combine school trademarks with student-athlete NIL, in products like video games, replica jerseys, and trading card collections are unworkable in college sports. So after that announcement, things progressed forward in a way that wouldn't allow players to be used in games featuring NCAA teams. And as we've seen with the recent Madden NFL games, having college teams without authentic players can be done. But that's on a smaller scale. What about a full game? Now that we know the game is coming, the big question is what's next? How authentic will this new EA Sports college football game be? Well, according to EA's press release, EA Sports College Football will feature over 100 schools, and that includes their uniforms, stadiums, logos, and even some surrounding traditions that some schools actually have. As far as those schools go, it's pretty easy to assume that all of the Power 5 programs like Alabama, USC, Clemson, Auburn, and others will be in the game. Independent programs like Notre Dame and BYU would almost certainly be a lock, along with some of the schools from the Group of 5 conferences like the American, Conference USA, and the MAC. From a gameplay standpoint is where things really start to get interesting. In the press release announcement, it was stated that EA Sports will be the exclusive developer of simulation college football video game experiences. So that's similar to what the company has with Madden and the NFLPA, where they have the sim, but other licenses such as arcade games and things of that nature and less realistic types of football can be made, which is kind of what you see from 2K with their upcoming NFL 2K title that's slated for later in 2021. One other thing to note is that, like with the old NCAA football series, the new EA Sports college football game is likely to utilize the same engine that Madden NFL is on. So a warning to those that are completely anti-Madden. If you don't like how Madden plays and feels, it might be safe to assume that you won't like this either. Features-wise, that's still one of the big unknowns. We can expect a Dynasty mode in one way, shape, or form, but a single-player career, online Dynasty, and others are still up in the air. It's even hard to guess if Ultimate Team is going to be a part of the game, as there's not going to be any real players. Though if there's any company that can figure out how to do an Ultimate Team in a game with no real players, it's probably EA Sports. And you could also see them license legends or former players that are currently in the pros for this type of mode. Now lastly, the release window is the biggest thing coming out of this. When will players be able to get their hands on this? Well, the game is confirmed to be coming to the next gen or current gen PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. However, the company is saying that the development of the game is just underway. That could lend credence to the idea that the game will only be on the new systems, allowing the developers to focus on optimizing for the new platforms and getting more into the game. So now that we know how we got here, it's time to pass the question off to you. What do you think about the return of EA Sports College Football, and what are you hoping comes of this game? What features do you want? What new additions that weren't in the past games that would you like to see come here? Leave a like on this video, let us know in the comment section below, subscribe to Sports Gamers Online, and hit that bell to be notified whenever a new video goes live. And as always, visit our website at sportsgamersonline.com.